Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Every Side of Cyber, Building a Nation-Scale Quick Reaction Force, sponsored by Raytheon on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today, Ben Cotton, the President, CEO, and founder of SciTech Services, Mark Orlando, the Chief Technology Officer for Cyber Protection Solutions at Raytheon, Dylan Owen, a Senior Manager for Cyber Services at Raytheon, and Dr. Shoojane Thompson, a Vice President Partner with Cyber and Biometrics Practice at IBM. During the last segment, I pulled out the cloud information, and all of a sudden it really got you guys going a little bit, but we had to take a quick break. So Mark, you were just about to jump into the discussion, and it was around whether or not the cloud is making it easier, harder. What's the impact it's having on cyber threat hunting?
I think it certainly makes some things easier, or can make some things easier on the infrastructure side, but moving your infrastructure from one place to another or shifting to the cloud doesn't absolve you from understanding your threat model. And I think one of the things that as defenders we sometimes overlook is that your threat model simply changes when you move to the cloud. For example, you need to start being concerned with things like API keys and making sure those are secured. It's not generally a huge concern in the enterprise traditionally, but now we have to worry about who's getting access to these applications and the data that's inside of them. A lot of the breaches we've seen that involve cloud infrastructures are due to poor API key security. So really just understanding the security and the incident response implications of moving to the cloud. You don't get out of that simply by shifting infrastructure to a cloud environment.
You can't just write in the contract that says you shall protect my data?
I don't think that's worked for us yet.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
I don't know why not. Just do it. One of the things when we talk about the cloud model, I think that's also important, is around this concept of risk. And I think, Mark, you brought it up, just understanding your risk. And the risk shifts, but you're not absolved of the risk either. So Dylan, also bring up, do agencies, do private sector organizations, are they understanding that, hey, just because you're putting an application or something in the cloud, they're not hands off anymore?
I absolutely think they do understand that. I mean, between what used to be FISMA and all the new OMB regulations on as an owner, an agency is owning that data, they're still responsible. So even though they may have moved the servicing of that data into the cloud, they still need to make sure that that cloud provider meets all the auditing and security requirements that are required by the NIST framework, and that how they handle that is all documented and that they're following proper procedures. So they definitely understand that they're not absolved of it, but there's still that little mindset of, well, maybe I don't need to do this part. It's like, no, you may not be actually doing it, but you're still responsible to make sure that it gets done on your behalf.
And I think that's key. It gets done, not just if you're not hands off, but you're saying to IBM, we'll pick on you, Dr. Thompson, again, show me where you're doing this. Report to me every week, every day, every hour, that whatever is happening is happening. I think that's part of it. One of the themes we've talked about through this discussion so far is the people side. It's come up in every one of the segments. So let's maybe go down that path a little deeper. And Dr. Thompson, one of the things that I think every organization is facing is, what are the right skill sets, and do we have the right skill sets, and if not, where do we find them to manage the cyber threat hunting, to do the cyber threat hunting? What's IBM's experience? How are you guys addressing the skill set challenges?
I mean, skill set challenges today is just, in all different dimensions. Specific in cybersecurity, we know there are millions of jobs cannot be filled today. And so the challenge of, identify the right set of skill sets, including hard skill sets and soft skill sets, are critically important. The traditional concept in terms of hiring folks based on their degrees is no longer applicable. And this is why in IBM we have PTAC, Path to Technology. As our corporate initiative, we're hiring folks who do not have the degrees, and help, create a structure, technology training, and soft skills training to bring them up to speed so they can fill this sort of big void of our talent resources in today's industries. For cybersecurity specifically, because if you would agree with me, cybersecurity is a new term. And so the household don't have that term. So the parents are not encouraging their children to pursue cybersecurity degrees. And this is why we have a great shortage. In addition, there's a diversity issue. There are only less than 20% of the cyber workforce today are women. And so think about the diversity of thinking. And we also, the panel were talking about how greatly needed the cyber professional really to have the very diverse background to understand the entire ecosystem. And so in IBM, we even have Cyber Day for girls, and to be able to really promote cybersecurity for the young girls in the middle schools and in a younger age. In addition to that, STEM, right? STEM today we are promoting engineering, science, cyber should be also part of it.
We'd have to ruin the acronym. I don't know what that's STEC or something, but and get rid of math. But let me ask you a little bit about the skill set that's needed. Ben, when you guys are looking to hire people to do the threat hunting, what's the skill set today that's needed that maybe wasn't needed 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
So I think most of those skill sets have remained consistent. Okay, so you've got you need to have a firm foundation in technology. You need to understand networks. You need to understand how computers work, how those types of things function. But one of the unique things that we look for when we're hiring people is actually what we call an investigative mindset. So the ability to pick out an anomaly and then have that urge to dive down into it to figure out why it's there, what it's doing, how it got there, and what the result is as it influences the investigation.
Do you test people as they come into for an interview? Do you give them like a puzzle and see who just solves the puzzle versus who?
I don't know.
Dylan's shaking his head, but let me see, Ben.
I don't know that I want to give away all our interview secrets, but I will tell you that some of the questions we ask are not just about technology. We ask a question about what do you do in your off time, okay? And then based on that question, what TV shows do you watch, right? And that gives us clues into how the person's mind functions. If they're big into NCIS and some of those detective shows, and that they've got this natural curiosity, they like to get to the root of a problem, for example. So it's not just about what does a /24 subnet depict, right? It's also about, is this going to be the person who's going to be able to have the independence and the curiosity and the knowledge base to answer those tough, complex questions that are asymmetric in nature?
Just real quick, tell us the story at break. You were talking about someone you hired and her background. It was Dylan.
Yeah. So one of the best analysts I ever hired. So she was a government employee doing traditional human counterintelligence, but her first job out of school was working for a private investigator. And she was just like Ben described, that investigative mindset. You sat down, working through a problem. She was like a dog on a bone. She kept asking the question why until she couldn't ask the question why anymore. And it's like, that's perfect. She knew very little about computers. I'm like, I can teach computers. I can teach technology. I can teach you that whole background, but you can't teach that natural curiosity to just keep going and be not satisfied until you get that answer. And those are the best people for this job.
And Mark, this comes around to this idea of you don't need to hire cybersecurity experts. There's plenty of people who are getting hired or maybe could be really good candidates to do this type of hunting and this type of response if they have not just math degrees and computer science degrees, but sociology degrees or psychology degrees. Are you finding, as you're interviewing people, that you're looking from a broader swath of educated?
Very much so. And it's all about, I think we're just talking about diversity of thought, diversity of perspective. One of the areas that I think we see that most often, aside from bringing in candidates to interview, is we've been very involved in the National Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. Raytheon sponsors that competition and has for a number of years. And that's something I think that we see every year there is not only really great diversity of thought, but also a lack of bias. So if you haven't been in the industry for a long time, and built up kind of a lot of preconceived notions, particularly in threat hunting, where you're making a lot of assumptions, maybe you're not even aware of that. If you're coming from a different background, or maybe you don't have as much experience in that line of work, it's really great to see some of the creativity that people bring to the job, and the lack of bias, and it kind of frees them up to think creatively, kind of think outside the box. question why, where maybe a more experienced analyst might not always do that. So
I had an interview just recently with the National Security Agency regarding their Codebreaker Challenge, and it's a fascinating effort because once you solve one, you have to solve the next, and that leaves you clue to the next. So you can't really, you have to solve them in some ways in order, but you sometimes can skip around a little bit, but you can't get to the final until you solve them all. And I got to talk to one of the students about it, and he happened to be a computer science major, but the fact is he was like, yeah, I was into cybersecurity, and then boom, now I'm into cyber. I think, are you, Dr. Thompson, talk a little bit about when you guys are hiring at IBM, what type of people are you bringing into the PTAC program, or just what types of skill sets are you looking for a cyber hunt?
So, like I say, the great shortage in this area, we actually are leveraging many different means. And so PTAC is one program. We also have cyber apprentice program. We then also have the traditional hiring, as a means to it. Having said that, I think we also have an appetite test to test people in terms of their cyber skill sets. And I think the very important thing here is that we say cyber skill sets. As of today, I have not seen the fine definition of what is the true cyber skill sets. Because my belief here is that to be a strong cybersecurity professional, like what you're saying here, is really got to have the investigative mindset, but also require very diverse background. So we do a lot of cross-training. We train people with cybersecurity skill sets. They are cloud engineer. They are, data scientists. They are the so-called web designers. And I think what we are saying here is that today's cyber problem is really reside in your digital enterprise on every element. And so if your workforce had the most diverse background, you tended to be able to be most powerful, most effective. And so in IBM, we're doing a lot of so-called cross-training, as well as really raising the awareness of the security hygienes, if you would, and then employ AI, machine learning to help folks to understand how they can take that technology into cybersecurity domain, if you would.
This has just been a great conversation. We're just about out of time, but I just want to give go down the panel one last time and ask the question of, a lot of agencies, as they're listening to this, a lot of other organizations, as they're listening to this, they're going, well, I'm already doing some of that, or I have to get started and do more of it. What advice, or what are some of the potholes you would say, please avoid? We've talked about some of them, but let me maybe throw it to Mark, since we started on with Dylan on the other side of the table earlier. What are some of the things you would recommend or advice you'd give?
Well, I think one of the things that we see most often that we haven't really talked about today is when we're talking about threat hunting or incident response, what does success look like? How do you know it's done? And I think that's an area where no matter who you're talking to, there tends to be the most disagreement on the answer. And I think the reason for that is it depends on your organization, and it really comes down to what are your goals for security? What's your business model? How do you generate value? What is your threat model? These are fundamental questions in answering that larger question of how do we know we're done? How do we know we're successful with an incident response or with a hunting program? And so that's, I think that's one kind of key thing that people miss, is asking some of those initial questions to get to that larger goal.
Unfortunately, a lot of times people go, well, success is no attacks. And as Ben said, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So how do you help them understand what success looks like? Is it tracking down in a certain amount of time, under 5 minutes, under 20 minutes? What is it?
I think really it just comes down to identifying what measures you want to use. And I think no matter what, as long as you have some measures that you can kind of put a stake in the ground, that's a good starting point. And then showing how you can improve over time. So, you talk about time-based metrics, pick a time, if it's an hour, if it's a day, if it's a week, but then measure that over time and make sure that you're improving that and going the direction that you want to go.
Dr. Thompson?
Well, I think the cyber hunting and incident response is a team sports. I think that's the key thing. And so when a government employee, any services associated with it, I think we got to really look into several things. One is open architecture. Stay away from proprietarism. And as an example, IBM Cloud employ the open architecture, stay away from the proprietary type of approach. That will allowing a better integration, better collaboration, if you would. First of all. Second of all, here is when you employ the different services, such as cloud services, do look into now your ecosystem is different, so your concept of operation has to change. As an example, when I say team sports, is who is doing what is the responsibility, the RACI relationship. That's second. Thirdly, here is that, often folks are looking at LPTA type of procurement. Cybersecurity, what you buy is what you get. And, as far as we understand the complexity of the problems, the shortage of the talent, lowest price is not going to work. And so I think that is an area that we really need to look into our acquisition and making sure that we stay away from this LPTA type of acquisition.
All right, well, this has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. So first, let me thank my guests. Ben Cotton, the President, CEO, and Founder of SciTech Services. Mark Orlando, the Chief Technology Officer for Cyber Protection Solutions at Raytheon. Dylan Owen, a Senior Manager for Cyber Services at Raytheon. And Dr. Shujane Thompson, a Vice President Partner with Cyber and Biometrics Practice at IBM. I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Raytheon.